before we get started, most of you got an invitation. If you didn't, raise your hand. Keith's going to bring it to you. But this is the first time in, I guess, about 3 years that our classes got to have our breakfast. And this year, because our class is a little different, a little smaller, we're going to do it differently. You don't have to bring anything but yourself. The breakfast will be provided. We'll start at 9:30. Now remember that, 9:30. Because if you roll in about 10 or 10:15, we'll have eaten without you. So 2 weeks from today, we'll have our breakfast, and then we'll have a little devotion afterwards. We hope y'all can come.
Okay, everybody's invited, visitors or not visitors, and some, I see a family or two that's not here today, so let everybody know, and let's come ready to eat. Okay, we're finishing up the book of Acts today, and as we do, I want to. We're in chapter 28 of the book of Acts. It's a lot in there, and I basically just want to go through. I want us to look at some different things. I want us to realize that that great opportunity may be wrapped in hard times. Have you ever noticed how God blesses us after we went through a difficult time? God there to help us. I want us to be able to use Paul as an example that we might endure. There's a verse over here talking about Elijah. Elijah endured a lot of things, but Elijah, at times in his life, he thought that, that I just can't handle this. But if I can find this, it's about Elijah. But in James 5 and verse 17, Elijah was a man subject like passion as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth for a space of 6 years and a half. And he prayed again, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Well, I don't know what you did, but that helped. Elijah was a man like we are, and Elijah went through a lot of difficulties, but yet the Bible said that he prayed and it rained. As we look at Paul, we can see Paul from the very beginning, how that he was a very wicked man. He was a persecutor. He was a blasphemer. He was, might as well say, a killer, because he helped the close of Stephen. We see how this guy didn't want nothing to do with church. This guy was very educated in the Senate and the Jewish word. He didn't want nothing to do with Christ. He killed, he murdered, he did all of these things. But yet, when he got saved, God can use him, and God did use him in a great way. And we want to think that God can use us the same as he did Paul. We need to act in light of the promise of Christ's presence. He said he would never leave us nor forsake us. He said he would go with us no matter what. Lord goes with us no matter what. He is there for us. He helps us. He guides us. He is there for us. Now, the first 6 verses that I'm going to look at talks about the miracle, and I went over this, and I hope all around the edge of my Bible I've got green and blue and black and red that I want to try to bring out as we look at this. And it said in verse 1, and when they were escaped, they knew that the island was called Melita, which will later, let me read the rest of the verse of that section. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness. For they kindled a fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks, he laid them on the fire, and there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. And when the barbarians saw this, the violent or poisonous beast, the snake, hung on his hand, they said among themselves, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he has escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffered not to live." And he shook off the beast into the fire, and felt no harm. Now be it they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly, but after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he is a god. Now, 3 or 4 things here I want to bring out. Malta is Malta is what it is. It's going to be changing the name in our present day. It's called Malta. And as I look, which it's not where I want, over here. This is something that was really come out to me. Malta, the bay where this took place today, is called St. Paul's Bay. Most bomb spot at the beginning of World War II. More bombs was dropped in that spot than any other spots in the beginning of World War II. I mean, this just really stood out. Because of its location, it produced a lot of honey. Malta in the Greek is honey. So they called the island after what they produced a lot of. Malta was an island made up of white stone, and over that white stone was about 12 inches of dirt. So they produced a lot of honey. They had a lot of stuff over there, flowers and things, I guess, to get that. Its length was 20 foot from east to west. It was, 20 miles from east to west. Its width was 12 miles from north to south, 60 miles around, 60 miles coast, 60 miles from the coast of Sicily. Meaning of the original name was refuge. So it was a place of refuge, and it meant honey. Showing kindness to that many people must have been extremely difficult. Nevertheless, they started a fire for the 276 men and received them with kindness. So Malta is where they're at. They found this group of people, they called them barbarians. Well, I begin to think that they were wicked people. That's what you think. Am I right, or was I just thinking wrong? But they were not. Many people who did not speak Greek were called barbarians. And that, see here where I'm at. And the barbarous people showed us no kindness. I took that to be they didn't show any kindness to me. They were barbarians. But they were saying they were barbarians because they didn't speak Greek and show no little kindness. I kept trying to find something to say, why didn't they say showed us a lot of kindness? Is basically what it was. And I've already read over here, this showed kindness to that many people must have been extremely difficulty. Nevertheless, they started a fire for the 276 men and received them with kindness. Somewhere in our lesson last week or so, they said how many people was on there. and it was, can anybody find that real quick there for me? I should have went back over there and found it. I know I've got it marked here somewhere. Yeah, but where's it at? I didn't get it. 27:37. Okay, that's it where it's at. It said in chapter 27 and verse 37, and we were in all the ship 216, which was 276 people, and they made a fire for this 276 people. So they were showing their kindness to this bunch of people. I mean, that first verse right there, if you don't have a commentary to read, you would think that this bunch of wicked people didn't show me any kindness. Did I read that wrong? Did you all think that when you first read it, maybe? But it's not what it's saying. Barbarous people were people that did not speak Greek, is what they called them. And no little kindness. He was saying that they showed them a lot of kindness. They kindled the fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. And when Paul, now they were getting them a place to stay. They were showing human compassion. They were showing kindness. They were showing hospitality. They were showing them that we care for you and all of these different things. They knew that they had people on there that was being taken to Rome to maybe be put in prison. They knew that there was maybe some other wicked men on there, and they had already been told what Paul was, because as we read through that next part right there, we can see that, let me go on down. It said when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, they came out of or a snake out of the heat and fastened to his arm. Now, I worked for the children's home when I was down here the first time in the early 2000s. And one day we was up cleaning out the camp, and there was a bundle of sticks laying there, and I was taking them over and putting them on the fire. Well, I just jabbed my pitchfork in that bundle of sticks and just whipped it over my shoulder, and I walked over to the fire, and as I was ready to move that thing around, a snake fell out of it, and I brought the around, and it fell in the fire. But the snake didn't bite me. But whenever I think about Paul and that snake biting him, I'll never forget about the snake that fell out of that bundle of sticks with me up at the children's home at the campground right there in front of the chapel. There's a bad wind in there for some reason, and blew down. They get more wind out there than I think anywhere. And we was cleaning up that area, and it had already been cleaned up, and it had laid there a while, that bundle was, and I was doing that. But this snake got a hold of him, and when the barbarous people saw this, they said among themselves, "No doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he has escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffered him not to live." He escaped the sea, but now he's going to die because he's been bit by this snake. And he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Now be it they looked when he looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead. But after they had looked a great while and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. So as we look at this, we can think that Paul did this. Let's see, I wrote something down here. If the Jews could not kill Paul, the storm could not kill Paul, do you think God would allow a snake to kill Paul? Paul had already went through all of this different stuff. He had went through the Jews and how that they had tried to kill him, how they had tried to get him, how they would do a hideout when he was coming through, and somehow somebody would warn him and he would get away, or somehow he would, one time they put him in a basket, wasn't it, let him down the wall, how that all of these things, but yet they could not stop him. If the storms that they were on right here, they said it was a terrible storm, but that could not stop him. And I think it was J. Vernon McGee had this in his notes, that do you think God was going to allow that snake to kill him? And no, I think God gave Paul a job, and Paul was going to finish it. You know, you and I have jobs, and sometimes it may get difficult to finish that job. Sometimes we may think it's time for me to quit this job, but until God puts an end to it, we're going to see that Paul keeps a doing and keeps a doing and keeps a doing all the way through this thing, and how that Paul works. So now we've got Paul showing these people that he's still alive. Now they've changed their mind and they're calling him a god. So I've got this note, Romans 8:28. Let me read it. I know we can probably quote it, but I would rather read it. That way I won't miss out on anything of it. Romans 8 and verse number 28, it said, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, and to them who are called according to his purpose." The promise in our afflictions is that God is going to be there with us and help us with our afflictions. And as we look at this, we can see God works through good and bad things. God, if the only time God worked in us was through good things, we would not know how to operate with bad. It's those bad things that makes us stronger. It's those things that's real difficult to go through helps us over those bigger things. You're going to learn that the longer you're in this thing, the more difficult it seems like they are. But the easier they are to get over them. Did I say that right? It's like life. I'm retired. Do I go to bed any certain time? I don't go to bed at 9 or 10 o'clock like I used to, when I'd have to get up at 5 and be to work at 6. I don't do that anymore. If I don't have nothing to do, I may not get out of bed till 10 o'clock. I mean, what says I got to get up at 8 o'clock? If you're there to get Fox News, you're going to watch the same thing at 10 o'clock that they had on at 8 o'clock. And if you watch the afternoon movies, the same thing that happened to Mr. Waddy's name a few years ago is still happening today. So, I don't even have to turn to the whole. If Matt Dillon's on an hour, I can turn him on at a halftime, and I can tell you what went on earlier, because it's going to come to a head over here. And same thing with Wagon Train. So why do I have to get up when I don't have to? You understand what I'm saying? When you're older, things just don't seem to bother you like they used to. But yet, those difficulties, God works with us through the bad as well as the good. We need to thank God that God has blessed us in a way that he has. Now we go to verse 7. It says, in the same quarters were possessions of the chief men of the island, whose name was Publius. Now, bear with me. You know how I am with names. I have it on my telephone, and listen to it. Who received us and lodged us 3 days, curiously or respectfully. He lodged us there 3 days, and it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of fever and of blood flecks. Now, this was some sort of a blood disease. It said The disease characterized by severe diarrhea with passage of blood, usually caused by an infection of the bowels, is what the commentary that I was reading. He was passing a lot of blood, and there wasn't nothing they could do about it. And they were here he was dead, and probably didn't have nothing to clock the blood like we do today, and so he might have been bleeding to death. I don't know. But here he is, very sick, and he was sick. Paul entered in, prayed, laid his hand on him, and healed him. And as we look at this, we can see how that Paul done miracles, and he healed. And verse 9, so when they was done, others also, which had diseases in the island, came and were healed, who also honored us with many honors, and when we departed, they laid us with much things as were necessary. So Paul then began working miracles and began healing people on the island that was very sick, and they began to reverence them. They began to give them needy things. They showed their gratitude towards them. They loaded them with needs that they needed because they knew they hadn't got to Rome yet, and they took care of them as they went. Any question up to that first 10 verses? Does it make sense? Am I bringing it out okay? I mean, if I was just to open up my Bible, I would think that they was a bunch of wicked men not going to give them any kindness. But here we got people that was not able to speak Greek, the reason they called them barbarians, and they showed them all kinds of kindness and took care of them as they proceed on their trip. Now let me look at verse 10, verse 11 and through 13. And after 3 months, we departed in a ship of Alexandria, which had wintered in the isle, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. Now, whose sign? It took me a while to find out what sign was. Did you all ever see any of these old wooden ships, big cargo things? I was hoping to get a picture of it, but I couldn't find one. On the very front of this thing, I was Army. I don't know what you call the front end. I do have it here somewhere. What those are ornaments with an image of Castor and Pollux. It was common to place on the very front the what do you call the bows? The very front. Okay, it was common to put this on the very front of the ship, the image of some person or god whose name the ship bore. The custom is still obvious today. But let me find my notes. I've got it here somewhere. Those two names right there, Castro and Pollux, are the names of two gods at that time. And they would carve this front out to make it look like a picture of them. And they were two gods. The Catholic has this little thing they wear around their neck and they put in the front of their car to help protect them through the day. What god is that? Saint what? Saint Christopher? My uncle was Catholic, only reason I know that, and he had one of them things in the front of his car. It was white, but you get in a car, you don't bother that. They wear it around their neck, a St. Christopher little thing. You know, I don't make fun of them if that's what they want. Some people carry a rabbit's foot in your pocket. Deer season, they carry the same hat in the woods they carried in there 20 years ago. I'm still carrying the same skinning knife that I got 40-some years ago. Am I going to get a new one? No, that's my, if you want to call it, good luck charm, I guess. But we know them don't work. God's in control. God's going to take care. But that's what these two were. They were the sign or the image of these gods, and they were placed on the very front of the ship. And I'll find my note on that here somewhere. I probably wrote it on another piece of paper to transfer it over here and didn't get it put over there. So 11, 12, 13, 12 and 13, they landed in Syracuse. We tarried there 3 days, and from thence we fetched a compass and came to Regegum. I put on my telephone, and I can listen to that all day long, and when I get up here. And after one day the south wind blew, and the next came the next day to Paulai, and where we found brethren and were desired to tarry with them 7 days, and so we went towards Rome. I want to see how far. I'm going to read verse number 15. It says, and from thence, when the brethren heard of us, they come to meet us as far as Apollorum, and the three. Do we have a picture of the map that you had on there last week? And I meant last night to lay my little pointer out and forgot it. But they come from a ways, whom when Paul saw, he thanked God and took courage. And there it is. Can I have that little green pointer? Boy, I tell you what, Keith's a lifesaver back there, him and his wife and Brother Larry. See the red mark down in the water? They started out down in Jerusalem. Paul arrested for the temple. Paul defended himself and the witness to the Jews in Jerusalem. Right here, the disciples warned Paul that the journey to Jerusalem. Paul determined to do the will of the Lord and go to Jerusalem. Then he here's the way now that they go. Is that the one you had on there last week? You got the fourth? There it is. There it is. They started out down here. That was an old one. Paul boards a ship sent to Rome to appeal to Caesar. Down in this area, they you had Festus, and what was the other one? That he went before, and they couldn't find nothing wrong with him there last week in the lesson, and they sent him on, but because he had to go all the way over here to Rome to see Caesar, they couldn't just turn him loose. So this is what they done. Here Paul's warned about the damage of the voyage ignored, and over here we can see the ship caught in storm 14 days, tempest tossed, hope to be saved, give up. Paul encouraged all all aboard, saying only ship will be lost. Stay on board. You're going to live as long as you stay on board of this ship. Then we go over to here, and we to Malta, and then we went through these three areas up into here, and it said that people came from quite a few distance off up to where they was landing. They go up this way is the way they go, and we're going to bring out three taverns and Potolia and these other places is the route that he's going, and he's going to end up there in Rome in our lesson here today. And as we look into verse number, let me read 16 to 24. It said, and when he came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoner to the captain of the guards, but Paul was suffered to dwell by himself to soldier with a soldier that kept him. And it came to pass that 3 days Paul called the chief of the Jews together, and when they were come together, they said unto them, Men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or custom of our father, yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of Rome, who when they examined me would have let me go, because there was no cause of death in me. Chapter 26 and 22 is what backing up here to see. 22, it says, And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. And they stood by me this night, the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, Fear not, Paul. And we can see then that they wasn't going to be nothing happen to them, that they were going to live and they were going to be innocent. They were going to come through this thing. But when the Jews spake again, it was constrained to appeal unto Caesar, not that I had ought to accuse my nation of. For this cause, therefore, have I called for you to see you and to speak with you, because that for the hope of Israel I am bound with this chain. Paul is bound with a chain. He's in Rome, and now I want to see all of this isn't written in the book. So I want to go down. Let's go down to verse 23 and 24, and it says, And when they had appointed him a day, they came many to him unto the lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of God, persuading them concerning Jesus, both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets, from morning till evening. And some believed the things which were spoke, and some believed not. That's a funny verse right there. I mean, if they didn't believe, they believed. If they believed, they didn't believe. But they made that a point. Some believed and some didn't. But yet Paul went with the message. Paul preaches at Rome. He instructs. There again, he's given that. He gave a testimony and testifying the kingdom of God. I'm sure there again it said he testified. It didn't. He didn't go into depth right there. Luke didn't. But yet he gave some of his testimony. Your testimony, my testimony, is very important. We need to remember that God is in control, and God may have saved you from alcohol. He may have saved you from dirty books and dirty TV shows and all of these different things that's contrary. God may have saved you from cursing, but God saved you. I give my testimony, and they was a family come and said, Roy, pray for my family. They're alcoholic. They was military, and they won't listen to nobody. But I was like that. But thank God I listened to somebody, and I listened to Jesus, and I gave my life to Jesus, and he turned me around and made something out of me that I wouldn't be if it wasn't for him. It's there. My past. I've got on both sides of my dad's family, alcoholics and drunks and all of this. My family all done it. Dad got out of it in 1950 or 51 whenever he got saved, but they were all like that. And it carried on with me. But thank God Jesus was there. My testimony means something to me. God brought me out of that, and God gave me a hope, and God gave me a place in heaven that one day I will be there with him. And as we see this, Paul, through all the things that he went through, he never gave up. He kept going. He kept preaching. Now, we can see that he taught them out of the book of Moses, out of the law of Moses, out of the prophets, from morning till evening. Why didn't he teach them Matthew, Luke? Why didn't he teach them these other? Because they had just come out of the time of the law. That's where they had been. And again, this is the last Sunday in this. This is that place where they had went through all of these works of grace. You know, there's people today that believes they don't get the Holy Spirit till maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months later. Listen, the Bible teaches the reason they didn't get the Holy Ghost whenever they got saved, they just had heard the gospel. And when they had just heard the gospel, they got saved and the Holy Ghost come. 3 or 4 different times, the Holy Ghost come after Paul taught them about salvation. And as we go through this, we need to remember the book of the law is there's prophecy in there about Jesus. You remember the blood over the doorpost? If you had the blood over the door, you would live. If we've got the blood in our heart, we're going to live. So, we can see the blood. We can see Jesus' prophecy all the way